What's up, everyone? Welcome into the DNVR Rockies podcast. We're back to a Monday edition of the DNVR Rockies podcast because we have some breaking news. The Colorado Rockies and sources, specifically Patrick Saunders, who had it first, announcing that Warren Schaeffer, no longer interim manager of the Colorado Rockies. He is now the full-time manager of the Colorado Rockies. And it's a move that I think we all kind of expected. I would have been really shocked if the Rockies went a different route, but we still didn't know. It was still up in the air. We had heard reports about, the fact that the Rockies hadn't had any formal interviews yet. Paul DePodesta still looking for a GM. I had thought they were going to wait until they got a new GM in place, and then they were going to go forward and hire a new manager. But either way, Paul said, you know what? Let's just get this one out of the way. Warren Schaeffer's our guy, and we're rolling with it.
I love it. And we talked about whether or not we'd want to bring him back, and I was very much in the camp that Warren Schaeffer deserves at least another year based on some moments that we got this season. Not a lot of good ones, but there was definitely a need to fire Bud Black when it happened. Warren Schaeffer is only 40 years old. Like, he can grow with a young team and is he relates to these players, I think. Like, you bring in a 75-year-old manager that's been around the block 10, 15 times, and you have this young team that we don't even really know what they're going to look like next year as of this.
Yeah.
And I'll ask you this. Does this make you think that largely the Rockies will, for lack of a better term, run it back with a lot of the same players next year, especially the higher level ones? Because to me, this hire signifies that they, whether or not, whatever you want to say about it from the outside, the last, especially around the All-Star break and after the All-Star break and heading into the end of the season, the culture of the actual clubhouse and the player to manager relationship seemed to be pretty decent. And you're in the clubhouse a lot more than I am and talk to Schaefer a lot more than I am, so you can speak on that. But it just seems like they had a better feel than just this team of, at the beginning when they were 7-33, this team of misfits where you don't know who's playing what day and this and that. And then Warren still had some of those issues, I guess, if you will. But I think the relationship aspect of it and Warren knowing Coors Field, knowing the clubhouse, knowing a lot of the guys that'll likely be back, I think it just makes sense.
Yeah, well, I'll take a bigger approach to answering your question. I think this is going to be a pretty mixed reactions from fans on this move, because I think a lot of fans, and I've talked to a lot of fans and even people within the media who say, I think the Rockies need to go a different direction. I think, they need to leave everything organizationally from last year and beyond in the rearview mirror and move forward with something completely different. And Warren Schaeffer, unfortunately for him, gets kind of lumped into that because whether he had any control or not, he was still the manager for most of the season last year when the Rockies had one of the worst seasons they've ever had in the history of baseball. So he gets lumped into all of that. And I understand people saying they want to go a different direction. But again, we've talked about this before, and I'll go back to the same point we've made. I don't think even the greatest manager in the history of baseball could do anything with the lineup that we saw from the Rockies last year. And so from the conversations I'd had with players, from the conversations I'd had with people in the clubhouse, even some of the successful players, some of the guys who had better seasons that, I don't know, maybe it wasn't as much of a reflection on how bad the Rockies were as a whole, said that they loved Warren Schaeffer. They had his back. They loved playing for him. They respected him. And from my perspective, that's all that matters right now. The Rockies have so many other problems that they need to figure out, that they need to fix to be a competent baseball team again, to be a winning baseball team again, that the manager to me is so low on that list, because in reality, you're just, it's 162 games throughout a season. The Rockies aren't going to the playoffs anytime soon, even if Dave Roberts was the manager. It doesn't matter who's managing this team. The team is not going to the playoffs next year. So you need a guy who builds a good culture and who can build respect from the players. And for me, Warren Schaeffer does that and more. He's a cheap option. He is he just fits the role that the Rockies need him to fit right now. And yes, would I love to have seen, I don't know, a more veteran manager in that role, or a bigger named manager, a guy who has more wins under his belt? Sure, but I think that time will come. And I'm not saying that I'm writing Schaeffer off long term, but I'm saying I think that time will come one day where we have a deeper conversation on, hey, the Rockies now as a team have some actual guys and they're competitive again. And now we can have the conversation of, do you go get a manager who knows how to win, or is Schaeffer the guy who you stick with? But I think for where the Rockies are right now, he's perfect. He's exactly what they need for the next couple years to bridge that gap until they fix all of the other problems.
Right. And it turns into not only we thought this was kind of going to be the year in 2025 when we did our season preview and we talked in spring training, and we thought, all right, there's going to be a lot of guys that are on a prove it year, or this year is going to be a prove it year for a lot of the players. And nobody proved anything, anything good. Let's put it that way.
Hunter Goodman. That's
did.
about it.
Yes,
Yeah.
Hunter Goodman.
Jimmy
Hunter Goodman
Herget
proved that he was a all-star level Silver Slugger winning catcher in the National League, which is incredible. But I think going into next year, 2026, you're really going to, not only now with the rehire, like if you hire somebody from outside the organization that's not here, you're sticking to them, right? You're giving them a chance to kind of rebuild this. And I'm not saying Warren doesn't have a chance here, but with Warren, it's like, all right, we're going to have, whoever rolls out there and runs out there out of the dugout on opening day is a lot of them are going to be players that, to Paul DePodesta and to this future GM and to the new front office, are under like severe scrutiny of like, do we keep you here around? Do we keep you around a long time or not? And if you perform, we will. And if you don't perform, we're going to clean house. And they've showed that they will do that. Like if we're talking about the Rockies pre DePodesta and pre, the whole Bill Schmidt and Dan O'Dowd, all those GMs and all the coaches and managers that we've had in the past, it's like, oh, they're doing the same thing. They're just keeping these same guys, and they're not changing anything, and they're just hoping for something different without changing anything. Well, they showed us, like DePodesta, they fired a bunch of the pitching staff and the strategists and all of these guys going basically through the minor leagues to clean house. Yeah. And so my firm belief is that it's, because you're going to hear a lot of this today is, well, they didn't have anyone left, and he was the last manager available, and the Rockies were the last team to hire him, so they just said, we're just going to be lazy.
Taking the easy route. Yeah.
And that's a fair assessment, but at the same time,
could be.
Paul DePodesta, in his short time of being the president of baseball operations here in Colorado, has shown us that he's not scared to fire people. Mm-hmm. And we already know, you talked about it, there was definitely a crack in the relationship between Bill Schmidt and Warren Schaeffer. And you hope, I think Warren Schaeffer's got to be, obviously, I mean, he's going to have to manage this team, which will be tough, no doubt. But he's got to be one of the happier guys in the world right now, because he's like, I get another chance I got thrown in one of the shittiest situations in professional sports, period. Yeah. Not only are you coming into a team that's 7-33, then you're trying to turn it around, but you don't have the guys, and you're getting big dicked by your GM essentially, and bringing up players that you don't even know about. You're not having any of these conversations. Yeah, he gets to erase all that from his memory and start from step one with DePodesta and the current roster, or the roster that goes into the 2026 season. Yeah,
and I realize now that you're saying that, I didn't fully answer your question from before about, does this affect the Rockies' decision making, or does this not even affect, but like, does this signal, that the Rockies front office is maybe not going to make certain decisions with player personnel because they're going with Warren Schaeffer as a manager? I don't think it does. I think Warren Schaeffer is a competent manager. He's a young manager, so obviously he still has room to grow, but he's a competent manager. He's shown that he can get the veterans to respect him. He can get the young guys to respect him. And now, like you said, he's got an offseason to figure this all out. He's got an offseason to prepare, to go into this year and have a game plan on how he wants to approach the season. We're going to be with him coming up here in a couple weeks when we go to Orlando, and we're going to get to ask him these questions. Hey, now that you're the guy, how does that change your approach to this offseason? Are you kind of game planning your roster, your specific rotation? Like, how does that change all of that? So we'll get a lot more information coming out of him specifically in the coming weeks. But I think it's a good start. I'm glad that we don't have to wait any longer on this, because again, I put this at the lower end of my priority list of things that the Rockies needed to get figured out this offseason. And I'm glad they just Paul DePodesta said, you know what? Let's check the box. I don't think it's a big risk to put Warren Schaeffer in there. He's expendable if the Rockies are playing really poorly again and you need to fire someone at the beginning of the year. Like, bridge the gap. Let Warren Schaeffer, get another chance here.
Yeah, I'm completely on board with this. And Warren, we even saw it this past year. There was a lot of times where he didn't even have to do media availability, or he didn't have to do this, and he was trying to better himself.
He's a motivated
scenes.
dude. Yeah,
he's behind the scenes, and nobody sees any of this other than the few media members that are in the dugout pregame, talking to him, seeing what he's like once that camera to Root, or not even Root Sports, whatever they're broadcasted on turns off.
Yeah,
you see who Warren Schaeffer is in that moment, and he's been great with the media. He's honest. He, definitely. I want to see happy Warren Schaeffer. I didn't get that at all. I don't think. Yeah, you've gotten it a few times in a few games, and granted, the whole season was like you can't be too happy when you're still the worst.
I think
team
he was
in
just
baseball,
stressed too. Like, he was just so stressed because he got thrown. And he said it to us kind of off air, but he said like, "Hey, look, man, like I'm just trying to get all the information that I can. Right? I'm learning. I'm like a kid thrown into this new situation, and I got to figure all this out." While everyone in baseball is watching you because you're the worst team in baseball. And so everyone's got their eyes pointed on you. And I think this upcoming year will give us a chance to see kind of what he's about. But I wanted to get to some of the reactions from people because, again, I said that this is going to be a controversial move, and it is. But I'm also seeing a lot of people who are pleased with this move. I see Josh on Twitter says, I don't hate the consistency, but I also don't know if he's the answer. Fair. And I don't think either Spencer or I is saying that he is the answer long term. I don't see a world in which that he couldn't prove that. Obviously he could if the Rockies end up being good and you start to see, him really managing a team full of misfits back into relevancy. That conversation could change. But again, I look at this as a perfect bridge fit for the Colorado Rockies. As someone else says, laughable franchise. I mean, you're going to get those. You're going to get people who say, again, this is the lazy, easy option to just go and take the guy who was already there, right? So understandable from some people. Nuggets Nation says, interesting, the Rockies had a better second half with Schaeffer. They did, but they also got really bad again at the end of the year. So again, I think he kind of made lemonade out of lemons there towards the middle of the year, but that kind of tapered off towards the end of the season. Someone else says, whack. Someone says, if you follow the Rockies at all, this should not be a surprise. Evan
one here, that's very unambitious.
Sure.
Couldn't get anyone else. That we're going to see that a lot.
But I see CSU Evan says going to be a lot of hate, but I actually like this move. More interesting will be the player roster. Again, I go back to that over and over again. It just does, the manager just doesn't matter right now to me, or at least doesn't matter as much. You got to get players. We're going to talk tomorrow. We've got our official show coming up tomorrow. And I want to talk about free agency because we're starting to see some names and actually some big names getting tossed around in the Rockies world, the Rocky sphere right now. And to me, the organization, from a general manager perspective, from a chief strategy officer perspective, from an obviously president of baseball operation perspective, that's what matters more. And then you go all the way around and you say, now the players are what matter. We've seen Paul DePodesta make a couple moves recently. They let go of Michael Toglia. They let Michael Toglia walk. And so we're starting to get an idea of what this organization is doing. And I think them just making Warren Schaeffer the manager is just a box that they just needed to check. I don't think you needed to go through a deep, multiple layered approach to hiring a big manager this offseason. Check the box, say we're moving on, we're focusing on getting a GM in place, and we're focusing on building a roster that looks better than it was last year for 2026.
Yeah, and just becoming competent. There was so many different places to place blame on the Rockies' losses last year that you hope you can figure out one or two things that tell you this isn't the issue. Because we like Warren Schaeffer. I'm biased. I love Warren Schaeffer. I thought he should have gotten this job. But there's a chance that this roster is semi-decent next year. When I say decent, I mean that very, very lightly.
Like Rocky skewed.
Like they win 60 games.
Like not the worst team in baseball.
Yeah, let's say they don't,
worst team ever.
Let's say they don't lose 100 games. They go 63-99, whatever.
That'd be huge.
But there's a chance that the roster is somewhat more competent. The pitching's way more competent than it was last year because, knock on wood, it can't get worse than it was last year. And then if you have Warren Schaeffer making a few decisions here or there that are actually costing you games, then you can take a look at what he's doing. But right now, there's just so many issues that you're right now you're filling a hole, and you're just going to see if that hole stays filled or if you're going to have to, put some flex tape on it in 2 years from now. As of right now, that's a spot to fill. He knows most of the roster is going to be back. You would think at least a lot of the key players, and he knows what it's like in the clubhouse. He knows those guys, and he's ready to build. Like DePodesta wants to build this from the ground up, and Warren Schaeffer's not somebody he's been around the Rockies organization, but he's 40 years old and he's managing a Major League Baseball team. Like, this is the way to go. And this could be, it's a big swing because it could be a big miss if you're like, oh, we're going to be good in 2 to 3 years and our manager's letting us down. But if he grows with the team and in 3 years, he's become like into his own as a manager and this team gets decent again and like starts to try to compete and gets players up from the minor leagues and is like, whoa, they turned this around in 3 years, and Warren Schaeffer's part of that. This is a huge home run hire that people are like,
absolutely,
oh, it's just the same guy.
Absolutely. It does change your perspective if the Rockies, if Warren Schaeffer can grow with the team. And like you said, in 3 years, if this team looks even just competitive again, where you're playing like meaningful baseball in the month of September, which would be a shocking change from what we've seen over the last few years, he would be in the conversation for being that long-term pick. Now, from where we stand right now, I agree with some of you. I don't know if he's the long-term fix, but for now, I think you just got to give him that chance. And I wanted to attack two questions that kind of killed two birds with one stone here. I saw Felix asked earlier in the chat about what's the next move for the Rockies now. And then I think it was Jason who said more interested to see how he fills out his coaching staff, which is a great point because now that Warren Schaeffer is the guy, although I'm sure Paul DePodesta is going to have a little bit of a say in some of it, and also the new GM, it really falls on the manager to build that coaching staff, to say who's going to be my pitching coach now that Daryl Scott's no longer there, who's going to be the hitting coach, who's going to fill those spots. So I am curious, and I hadn't thought about that, Jason. So thank you for bringing that up. It just didn't cross my mind. But yeah, he's going to get to say what his staff looks like now. We're seeing Tony Vitello with the Giants bringing in some of his former coaches from Tennessee and to coach the Giants with him. I mean, so it's like we're going to get to see kind of how Schaeffer wants to build this coaching staff in complement of what this organization is building as well from a roster standpoint. And so to go back to Felix's question of what's the next moves, I think we're going to start seeing some coaching decisions coming down. And then I also think we're going to start seeing some player decisions now that free agency is completely wide open. We obviously saw the Mariners make a couple moves. I think the Rockies
trade yesterday.
We saw a trade, come through yesterday with Nimmo and the Mets. I don't think the Rockies are doing anything blockbuster. And again, we'll talk about that more in depth tomorrow on our show. But I think now you can kind of start to branch out and make some of those other branch moves. Yeah,
now that you've climbed one step of the ladder, you can't just skip steps. You can't skip steps on a ladder. They've laid that foundation. They know that Paul DePodesta is going to be the president of baseball operations. Now Warren Schaeffer is going to be your manager, and he can build out what it's basically all cleaned out. I mean, it'd be interesting to see from the main baseball operations people how many people are going to be different in 2026 and already are. And Mr. Purple brings something up that I honestly don't think they'll micromanage his choices as much because they chose him. And this is exactly what we talked about with Dick Monfort and Walker choosing Paul DePodesta, is that they make the one choice and you let that other person make their choices. Like, you hire a good employee, a good manager, and this works in the business world and in baseball. You hire a good manager and you trust them to then train their staff and work with their pitching coach, work with their bullpen coach, work with their hitting coach. And that's the decision you're making as Paul DePodesta. Now, him and this future GM, they're going to have a lot of different operations like that they're going to have to deal with next year. But you chose, like, and I kind of disagree with you. He did choose Schaefer. He could have went out and hired somebody else. He easily could have, and he chose to keep him around. I don't think nobody chose Warren Schaeffer if you really think about it. Like, he was the manager, he was the bench coach, and when they fired Bud Black, they're like, well, what makes the most sense here? And it's, put the interim tag on Warren Schaeffer, and now DePodesta's made the conscious decision to say, okay, well, he's going to be our full-time manager as we begin this rebuild. And we've already seen moves made, very small on the Rockies scale, but I don't think this not hiring a GM yet is of concern right now because it's not like they haven't done anything. They've made like 5 or 6 different moves, and that's clearly coming from Di Podesta.
Yeah, and I mean, Di Podesta's been a GM. So yes, he's the president of baseball operations. You're looking at a chain of command, president to GM to so on and so forth. But he's been a GM before, so he's operating as a GM right now until they get a GM. I would fully expect when we're in Orlando to talk with Paul Di Podesta and whoever the GM is by then. I mean, I do think we'll see a GM
3 weeks from today, basically.
Just about, 2.5, 3 weeks. So I think the Rockies will have that. They've said that that's their goal, is to have a GM before the winter meetings where we meet with the GMs. So I'd be curious to see if that's actually like kind of which direction they head. But like I said, I think from our perspective right here, it feels like this is a. It doesn't really pull me one direction or the other. I mean, I think I lean a little bit more positively on this, saying, hey, this is the right move because I think the organization's set up that way. But again, I wouldn't be super upset if they had gone a different direction. But I do just think, given the situation you find the team in, let's just say they had hired Don Mattingly, a name that people kept bringing up when he left the Blue Jays. If the Rockies had hired Don Mattingly, sure, that would have been obviously a commitment from the organization that would have been telling you more about the aggressiveness of the organization. But again, the Rockies are still going to lose a lot of games next year. They're still not going to be in the playoff race next year. So no matter who the manager is. So does that kind of feel like a wasted year for a guy of Don Mattingly's caliber to bring in this veteran, longtime successful manager to manage this team that you just have no chance to actually get anywhere this year? This is a long-term rebuild. The Rockies are at minimum 3 years out. And that's us being generous. That's us with our purple tinted glasses on. It's going to take a long time to build this team back to being a competitive organization again. I don't feel like you needed to waste a veteran competitive manager or even, an unconventional manager like Albert Pujols or something like that. I feel like you don't need to waste that on a year like this. Let Schaeffer be the bridge. Let Schaeffer try to work his magic, give him a chance to prove himself over these next couple of years, and then reevaluate that down the road.
Exactly. And if we're being real with this, we definitely argued that the Rockies president of baseball operations job was one that people wanted. Now, on the other side of that coin, I can kind of argue that being the manager of this team is not a job people wanted.
Yeah.
And not necessarily saying that nobody wants to be this manager, but if you're going to hire a new manager, 90% chance that if it wasn't Warren Schaeffer, it was going to be a guy like Warren Schaeffer that had never managed in the MLB before, knew he's either a bench coach at the major league level or a AAA manager.
Bobby Meacham
Something like that. That's where you're going to have to go. You're not getting a Don Mattingly here. You're not getting a Bruce Bochy here. You're not let's be realistic about what the team is. And that's why this hire makes the most sense to me, because if they're going to go with Warren Schaeffer or a bunch of other guys at his level, why not go with the guy that has a little bit of comfortability and a rapport, not only in the organization, but with the players that are going to be on the field? Well,
you had the veteran manager. Bud Black took the Rockies straight to the playoffs the minute he was hired back in 2018, 2017. Yeah, he took the Rockies to the playoffs right after that. So you had the veteran manager that came in with that star-studded team back in 2018, 2019, and brought them to back-to-back playoffs.
Did you hear what you said, though? Star-studded team.
Yes, exactly.
And that's the key.
Exactly.
That is the key.
It's
that's not what this is.
Yeah, the Rockies are building. They've got a bunch of young players. They might bring in a couple vets to balance the team out. But you've got a bunch of young players. You're not going to bring in some veteran manager. And I don't think even if you did, it would be a successful situation. You talk about like setting someone up for success. I hear that all the time when I have a friend who's a dog trainer, and they always say, like, when you're training your dogs, you got to set your dogs up for success. Like, don't put them in a situation where they're going to fail because you want to build their confidence. Like, right now, the Rockies are just trying to build confidence as an organization. You've got a brand new president of baseball operations. You've got a bunch of young guys. You've got all these minor leaguers that are waiting for their chance, and you've got a new manager. Don't bring some, Don Mattingly. I just keep using him as an example. Don't bring in someone like that who's trying to, salvage his managerial career at the end of of a long tenured career, and put them in a position where they're going to fail. Let Warren Schaeffer continue to grow, continue to build, and see where that goes. If it doesn't work out in a couple years, then you move on. Then you see where the organization is. You reevaluate. But set this team up for success. I think Warren Schaeffer is as good a guy as you can expect for where this organization is today.
100%. Do you think that part of keeping Warren Schaeffer around is a little bit of a potential. Now they had to match up. They had Paul DePodesta and Warren Schaeffer had to match a semi what they wanted to achieve or where they're going or what their strategy is, right? All of that had to line up at least a good amount. But this also feels to me like a bit of Paul DePodesta is like, hey, I've got a lot to do here, but I also like Warren Schaeffer can tell me exactly what these players are like behind closed doors. And that's almost a help for him to be like, okay, well, we know Hunter Goodman's an all-star and a Silver Slugger. We're either going to trade him for a lot or we're going to keep him. Like,
but there's about this Jimmy Herget guy.
There's these other players on the roster where Paul DePodesta can watch film and try to watch all 162 games. Please don't do that again. You know, he can do whatever he wants to do and try to take in all this information, but nothing to him is going to be more valuable than literally going through their entire active roster with DePodesta and Warren Schaeffer and saying, hey, what do we think here? What do we think here? What do we think here? Because no matter what, even if Warren Schaeffer, like there's no reason Warren Schaeffer would like lie to him or like be like, hey, this player's better. Like it's his job too now. Yeah. And now if he can build this team into a winner in 2 to 3 years, he'll be the long-term guy.
100%.
And so he's got a lot to lose as well. And so he can be brutally honest with Paul DePodesta and the future GM and whoever ends up calling the shots at the roster level of what these guys are actually like and where they have a chance to grow and if they need to move on from him.
Yeah, I love it. We got to wrap things up here because we are fitting this show in between a bunch of other shows. We got Denver Sports Podcast coming up next. I'm hosting that with Harrison Wind, so we're going to be talking all things Nuggets. But we had to sit down and talk about this news because the Rockies made another decision. They made another breaking news moment. So we'll talk more tomorrow. We're gonna have our normal Rockies pod for an hour at noon tomorrow on Tuesday. So be sure to come check out that. We'll talk about free agents. We'll also talk probably more about the Schaeffer situation. But appreciate you guys hanging out with us. We're gonna see maybe some more crazy ejections next year. We're gonna get another year of Warren Schaeffer. So I'm excited. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll see you guys tomorrow right here on the DNVR Rockies podcast.
We all silly like the mayor.